Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Friday, August 11th. Over the next few days, we will continue with this next surge of monsoon moisture. Today, thunderstorms will push further north and west into parts of western Nevada and even up into the Elko area. These thunderstorms on the western fringe, both today and tomorrow, will be a mix of wet and dry. However, they will be very isolated. We'll also have deeper moisture further south for continued showers, thunderstorms, and higher humidity over the southern half of the Great Basin the next couple of days. On Sunday, again, we'll see much of this activity continue in central areas of the Great Basin, and we'll be watching some of these areas of northwest Nevada heading into the early part of next week for some drier thunderstorms. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen significant precipitation in the far south. Some areas have seen over a quarter, over a half inch of precipitation, with even higher amounts right near the border with the southwest. Further north, the precipitation was a little more spotty, but relative humidity is definitely elevated in areas where we have our lightning over the last 24 hours. We're also seeing some early morning thunderstorms in parts of the central Sierra, so those will increase and spread a little bit further north. Yesterday, Great Basin fire activity was light, with just smaller fires reported across the Great Basin and minimal growth on our large fires due to the higher humidity down near the Thompson Ridge and the moisture in place, and then also due to the recent moisture from central Idaho. However, central Idaho is drying out, but again, it will take several days still before these fires really start to perk up. So right now, again, a minimal fire activity. Over the last 7 to 14 days, we've seen above normal precipitation across the Great Basin, especially in the north over the last week as the monsoon moisture really pushed further north into Idaho earlier this week. Dry spots, again, continue to be the western half of Nevada that really hasn't seen much of any precipitation in the last 2 weeks or more. So those are the areas we'll be watching as lightning returns to these areas over the coming days for a mix of wet and dry storms that potentially could certainly have some new ignitions and potential growth with any gusty outflow winds or in some of the drier areas. The Severe Fire Danger Mapping System for ERC shows the higher fire potential over parts of western areas of the Great Basin and certainly much lower over the eastern half of the region. And our ERC point map, again, we have kind of a mixed bag of things happening here. On the west side, we still have drier conditions with high ERCs that haven't changed much. They just continue to climb ever so slightly. Further north into Idaho, with that recent moisture, ERCs really dropped, but they are on the rise as drier air has already moved in to those areas. And then over southern areas, we did have higher ERCs, but those have dropped and will continue dropping with the moisture in place that will continue here over the next several days. Currently, our ERCs, looking at some of our charts where we have our large fires up in central Idaho, you can see the significant decline in ERCs, but they have started to rebound. Still well below normal, so again, it will take several days here before those ERCs really get up closer to normal. In the south, we saw our ERCs rise with the recent warm and dry conditions, but again, have started to come down over southern areas. In some areas, they're already below normal with the moisture in place, but again, will continue to trend downward here over the next few days. Our satellite loop from this morning shows the ridge dominating the southern tier of the U.S. with an area of low pressure near the central California coast. So this is helping with those southerly flow to help usher in that moisture further north into the Great Basin. So you can see the edge of the cloud cover there up into parts of northern Utah and even into the central Sierra just south of the Reno area. So again, that'll be the northern extent of the thunderstorms today. Looking at our weather pattern for later today, again, you can see that moisture, the northern fringe there from the Carson district over towards Elko in northern Utah. Further south, we will see those wetter thunderstorms, but a mix of wet and dry on the fringes. You can see from our significant fire potential outlook, the lower fire potential over southern and eastern areas, and still moderate fire potential over western areas. So again, those will be the areas we'll be watching as this lightning moves in. Relative humidity has really increased over the southern and eastern half of the Great Basin to above 25%. And over northwest Nevada, parts of western Nevada, this is where conditions are still dry, where we'll see RHs in the teens, and even some drying obviously happening up into Idaho. Winds will generally be on the lighter side, aside from any gusty outflow winds. As we move into Saturday, no big changes, just the moisture pushes just ever so slightly north. A still very minimal impact from the moisture on the western side of the Great Basin. The central Sierra might start to moisten up here, heading into the Bridgeport-Walker area as we get towards the weekend with the moisture that remains in place for continued thunderstorms. Otherwise, still lower fire potential further east. Relative humidity, again, still remains dry on the west side, where these mix of wet and dry thunderstorms will continue, and remains elevated down south, especially in the higher elevations of Utah. Winds again remain light. May see some breezy winds over the Snake River Plain with some RHs in the teens, but gusts generally in the 20s. As we move into Sunday, the moisture really remains over the southern half of the Great Basin. So we will continue to see those showers and thunderstorms with drier air in the north. Still no high risk for Sunday. It does look like those thunderstorms will remain a little bit further south and probably be on the wetter side, or at least have some increased RHs with some spotty wetting rains. Relative humidity remains lowest over northwest Nevada rather, and even into parts of Utah that are kind of in and out of the moisture. And then wind gusts still remaining light with the exception of gusty outflow winds. You can see from the 3-day forecast amounts of precipitation, some of the heavier amounts of precipitation will be in the Arizona Strip, the higher terrain of Utah, and then also the higher terrain of the Central Sierra. Otherwise, more spotty precipitation, but we will see higher humidity where we see the thunderstorms and a mix of wet and dry storms even on the northern fringe. As we go into Monday, this is where this area of low pressure starts to push a little bit further north, so we could see some drier lightning over parts of western or northwest Nevada ahead of this low on the fringe of that monsoon moisture. So we do have some high risk just for Monday for northwest Nevada. Right now, coverage still looks pretty isolated, so we'll continue to watch that. But it looks like anywhere further south and east, we will see those higher humidities and a mix of wet and dry storms. As we move into Tuesday, a very little change. Again, still drying on the northern and western fringes. All the moisture really confined to the southern half of the Great Basin. And then going into Wednesday, the middle of next week, we could see more thunderstorms move into western areas and then continue pushing north on Thursday. So we will be watching these western areas. We could see some of these PSAs start to moisten up a little bit with the thunderstorms, but again, we'll be watching that towards the middle of the week. In the meantime, still a mix of wet and dry storms on the western fringe. On the 7-day total precipitation, you can see obviously the higher terrain of Utah into the higher terrain of Nevada and the Sierra is what will be getting much of the potential for wetting rains. Anything in the lower elevations will be a little bit on the drier side, kind of spotty precipitation, and a mix of wet and dry storms on this northern and western fringe. The 8 to 14-day outlook, taking us from the 18th to the 24th, still shows above normal precipitation for much of the west. It does look like possibly Utah might be getting another monsoon push towards this time period, but as far as western and northern areas, that still remains to be seen whether that moisture will make its way further north and west. But it will be something we'll be watching. Obviously, any moisture, it would be welcome for all areas of the Great Basin, but we'll see how that plays out here towards the mid to late month. That concludes our webcast for today. Check back tomorrow for the latest updates.